Hey everybody, this is Matt from BrushlessRCMotor.com. Wanted to go ahead and continue the build on my Duratrax Evader EXT2, going from a brushed stock version to the brushless system I'm putting in. Right now I just want to go ahead and update a few parts that I've put in within the last day. My son and I were able to go ahead and beef up the gears in the transmission and the differential, as well as we installed some aftermarket CV shafts. So go ahead and show you what we've done so far. First thing I can do is show you the old transmission assembly. This is the old transmission, gears up here with the old stock differential, as well as the spur gear assembly. Now I've loosened everything so I could show you how it comes off. So you have the actual lock nut up top here. And take that off. You can have a few washers come off. The actual tension spring itself, which is what you use to adjust the slipper clutch setting. Another washer. They have, they call it another washer, but it's technically a little bushing. It's about 2 or 3 times the thickness of one of the washers here. And one more washer, and the actual stock spur gear. Okay, spur gear itself comes with the slipper pad assembly, slipper clutch, excuse me, screwed into the back of the initial spur gear. Okay, I went ahead and changed out the slipper pad itself to an aftermarket one to give me a little bit more control over what I can do with it. All right, the back of the stock slipper clutch assembly and connects to the top shaft here. Alright, I went ahead and unscrewed all the gears so I can show you the inside of the transmission case. Okay. There's 3 main components of this. Okay. First is the stock differential. Now it does have bearings that come with it on either side of the transmission case here. I went ahead and took those out, put them in my new case, reused those, but this is the stock differential. Notice that the actual gear is plastic on this. This would not hold up to the brushless power I've got coming in, so I went ahead and replaced this. Okay, next thing you have is the idler gear. Now the idler gear is actually metal stock. However, from my understanding, it's not a hardened metal like it would need to be for a brushless setup. So the gear can actually break teeth and can actually break the top shaft gear as well. So the top shaft here in the original stock version has got a tiny pin going through it down here right at the base of the transmission case. Now that's extremely difficult to get out without damaging the stock case, so I opted not to try to reuse the case itself, and I went ahead and just purchased a new case for $3.50 from a local hobby shop. Alright, basically they assemble the same way you take them apart with the new pieces. The new top shaft and idler gear are going to go right in place, same as before. Make sure you have ball bearings in place where they need to go. Make sure you put your ball bearings back where the actual differential seats. Put those back into place. I myself like to use a little bit of motorcycle chain lube just on the gears as I put them back together. Okay, that's just personal preference. I've had some good luck with this. It doesn't leave any big buildup, and it actually coats the gears and keeps everything nice and quiet. Figure, hey, if it's good enough for my motorcycle, it'll work for RC as well. Okay, then basically you assemble the case same way as before. It's going to have a few screws going in it. It's pretty self-explanatory once you look at it, and I'm not going to get into that. Alright, next thing I did was I went ahead and took out the old dog bone assembly and put in new CV shafts. Alright, the dog bone assembly consists of dog bone itself, the axle cup, which is where the wheel actually attaches to, so this would be inside the wheel here, and the nut mounts on the outside of this to hold the wheel in place. And you also have little tiny springs like this that hold the dog bones in place. So the actual axle cup itself has a spring in it, And then the differential cup itself will also have a spring. Now, I went ahead and replaced these with CV shafts to avoid the problem that a lot of people are having with the springs, the stock springs. Basically, these dog bones, if they bend at all, or if you land hard on a bump, what ends up happening is they can pop that spring out while you're driving. And the spring is used to hold the dog bones in place, but if you're putting a lot of torque on these things, the springs can pop out and give you guys a real headache trying to find them. So if you do run into that, you are able to use a ballpoint pen spring, one of those clip type pens, to go ahead and cut it down to size and put it in a pinch. But I opt for the CV shaft, so that way I don't have to mess with any of that. Okay, here's the new transmission and differential and CV shafts installed on the truck. I have to go ahead and install the slipper clutch, the spur gear, and go ahead and mesh the two gears up, the pinion and the spur gear, and then put the protective cover on, and I'll be ready for another run on my brushed setup. I still do have the stock brushed motor in. I am running the Castle Mamba ESC, but I'm soon to go ahead and change out the motor to my brushless, which just came in, by the way. So, have the Tacon 3650, and the kV on this is 3930, so 3,930 kV, and that's basically 3,930 revolutions per minute per volt that you're applying to it without a load. A lot of people get confused on that. The rating is with the motor with no load on it whatsoever. So obviously the heavier load, the harder the motor and the ESC have to work in order to try to get up to the full RPM. Anyways, back to the slipper. Okay, so the new slipper pad and the new gear assembly is a little bit different than the stock. They have a dual slipper pad setup, which would be one pad on either side of the gear. However, since some of the parts are on back order for the new truck, the brushless version, until late January, beginning of February, I had to kind of fab something. So I'm borrowing the actual stock spur gear with the attached slipper pad. Like I said, I went ahead and upgraded the pad myself. Just used some CA glue to hold the larger pad in place, and this is so it'll mesh up with the slipper plate itself on the new setup. So I installed that, slide it into place, and at this point, usual setup is you'd go ahead, have a washer, then a bushing, then a tension spring, another washer, and the lock nut. Okay, there we go. Alright, in this situation, unfortunately, the bushing that I was able to find is not quite large enough diameter to go all the way down to match up with the spur gear. So what I have to do is I have to put this spring on first, and, excuse me, I use the spring, then I have to use a washer, then I'll actually end up putting the bushing on, and then we'll go ahead and do the nut. I'm going to go ahead and tighten this down and show you how everything's working out, and I'll show you real quick once it's set up how it looks. Alright everybody, I've got the slipper clutch assembly back on the truck. Obviously this is a modded version. This isn't exactly what was intended. However, this will work in a pinch until the other parts come in. The main idea is to apply a certain amount of tension on the spur gear so it will slip when there's too much torque applied, which can actually save the rest of the transmission gears and differential gears inside the truck. Usual safe adjustment on these when you get started with a setup is full turns back from all the way tight. So I went ahead and tightened everything all the way down. You can actually use a little wrench they provide with the truck, and what I like to do is just take a good reference point. So for 2 full turns, I take one side, hold everything in place, and then you're actually going to, excuse me, it's a little tough, rotate, that's one turn, that's 2 times. Okay. So that is my slipper clutch assembly for this truck. I'm going to go ahead and do a couple of quick test runs before I swap over to the new brushless motor, and we'll do a couple of test runs on that as well. One thing to note, I am currently running a 8.4 volt battery pack, just something very simple that most people would be running in their trucks, so nothing fancy here. Good point is you will get a lot more performance and a lot more power out of your truck if you run a better battery setup once you're in a brushless system. So I will be switching over to LiPo here in just a little while, but I want to go ahead and get some actual drive time in on the nickel metal hydride first, because most people don't use a LiPo off the bat. They usually use what comes with the truck or what they can afford. And of course, nickel metal hydride is a little cheaper and easier to come by. So I'm going to go ahead and do a few test runs on that to show everybody the difference before we go over and do some LiPo. And once I go LiPo, I'm going to go ahead and show you guys the difference between a 2-cell LiPo, which is what the stock brushless Duratrax Evader can use, and a 3-cell LiPo, which my setup will be able to use because I've got the Mamba Max ESC. And that's it for now. I will catch up with you guys later. Thanks for watching.